The first thing I remember that night in the hospital wasn't the tubes in my nose or the monitors blinking red and green above my bed. It was the way my chest burned like someone had set a fire inside my lungs. I couldn't get a full breath no matter how hard I tried, and every inhale sounded like broken glass scraping my throat. I was 25, but I felt like a child again, helpless, scared, desperate. The nurse had told me earlier that I was lucky to be alive at all. Pneumonia had spread fast, and the oxygen machine was the only thing keeping me steady. But lying there, pale and trembling, I didn't feel lucky. I felt trapped. Trapped between life and death, and trapped in a world where my parents were the ones who decided which side I deserved. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. Because when they walked into that hospital room, it wasn't to comfort me. My mom's heels clicked against the tile, her lips curled in disgust before she even spoke. "Still clinging on, huh?" she muttered, arms crossed, her eyes moving over me like I was something rotten on the floor. I wanted to turn my head away, but I didn't have the strength. My dad stood beside her, hands in his pockets, that same cruel smirk I'd seen since I was little plastered on his face. "The machine's too loud," he complained, glaring at the steady hiss of oxygen. Then his eyes slid back to me. "You know, it's a shame. All this money, all this effort wasted on someone like you. You never were worth much." My lips parted, but only a hoarse whisper came out. "Please." I tried to beg. My throat was so dry, my voice cracked. "Please, don't." That was when he leaned forward, his hand gripping the machine like he owned the right to decide my fate. "Don't waste oxygen on trash," he hissed, loud enough for the nurse outside to hear, but cold enough to make her freeze in place. "Save it for someone useful." And with one twist, he turned the dial down until the hiss faltered. My chest collapsed in panic. I clawed at the sheets, trying to scream, but nothing came out except a wheeze. My vision blurred. My whole body trembled as I tried to fight for air. My mom laughed under her breath, shaking her head as if the sight of me gasping was entertainment. "Finally," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "She looks like what she is. Pathetic." The nurse pushed into the room finally, her voice rising in protest. "Sir, you can't do that. Step away from the equipment." But my dad just waved his hand like she was a fly buzzing in his ear. He only stepped back when the alarms blared, when the monitor beeped so loud other staff started rushing in. They pulled my parents out into the hall, but not before my mom leaned down close to me, her perfume sharp and suffocating, and whispered, "If you die, at least the world will have one less burden." She smiled as if she had just given me a gift. Then she walked out, her heels clicking, leaving the stench of cruelty behind. I clung to life that night not because of them, but in spite of them. As the nurses fixed the oxygen flow and scolded them in the hallway, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to die in that bed, not for them, not under their terms. If I made it out, I wouldn't just survive. I would make sure the people who called me trash learned exactly how much fire trash could hold when pushed to the edge. And for the first time in years, even with tubes in my nose and sweat on my forehead, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt the first flicker of revenge warming my broken lungs. I survived that night, but it changed something inside me. Before, I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I kept trying to earn their love, maybe, just maybe, they would see me as worthy. But lying in that hospital bed, every cough tearing at my chest, I understood the truth. They didn't just fail me. They wanted me gone. They wanted me erased. The doctors told me recovery would be slow, that pneumonia scars could last a lifetime. But while my body healed, my mind sharpened. Each day in the sterile white room, I pieced together flashes of memory. My father's hand on the oxygen machine, the way my mother laughed as I gasped for air. Those images didn't haunt me, they fueled me. I had nothing waiting for me outside that hospital. No family to lean on, no parents to bring soup or hold my hand. The only visits I got were from strangers. The night nurse who slipped me extra water, the janitor who told me a dumb joke when he saw me crying, the elderly patient across the hall who mouthed, "Keep fighting," when she saw me coughing through the glass. Strangers gave me more love in 2 weeks than my parents had in 25 years. And then came the final straw. One morning, I heard laughter echoing down the hall, my parents' voices. My stomach dropped. They weren't there to see me. They never were. I overheard them chatting with a doctor about my insurance. My mom's shrill voice carried, "If she dies, the policy payout comes to us, doesn't it?" My dad chuckled. "Finally, she'll be useful for something." I clenched my fists so tight the IV line tugged, my vision blurred, but not from sickness. This time, it was rage. They weren't just trying to break me emotionally. They were betting on my death like it was a winning lottery ticket. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until the fluorescent light buzzed like static in my ears. The word trash repeated in my head until it lost meaning, until it became a drumbeat pushing me forward. If I was trash to them, I would show them what happens when trash burns. When I was discharged, I didn't go home to them. I signed the forms with shaky hands and walked out the hospital doors with a plan forming inside me. My body was weaker than it had ever been, but my mind was sharper than a knife. I rented a small basement apartment with the little money I had saved from part-time jobs. It wasn't much, peeling paint, a draft in the winter, but it was mine. It was freedom. At night, coughing into my pillow, I sketched out a blueprint, not of buildings, of revenge. Step 1, independence. They thought I'd crawl back to them begging for food, a roof, scraps. I refused. I got a job answering phones at a rundown office. Every paycheck, I saved a little. While they wasted money on my sister's vacations and dresses, I saved pennies that turned into dollars, dollars that turned into my escape. Step 2, knowledge. My parents prided themselves on control. They believed they knew every weakness I had, but they underestimated me. I started researching inheritance law, property ownership, trusts, and wills. Late at night, I read case after case about families who tried to exploit the useless child and ended up losing everything. Step 3, patience. That was the hardest. Every time I coughed and felt the scar tissue in my lungs, every time I woke up sweating from dreams of suffocation, I wanted to storm into their house and scream, but I bit down on the urge, because real revenge wasn't about noise. It was about timing. And then the chance came sooner than I expected. I was working late one evening when an email slipped into my inbox not meant for me. A contractor had accidentally CC'd the wrong address. The email detailed renovations being made to my parents' house. My parents weren't paying for it. They were using money siphoned from an account that was supposed to cover my medical expenses. They had drained it without hesitation. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Proof, tangible, undeniable proof of what they were doing, and more importantly, a way to turn their greed into the rope they would hang themselves with. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, eyes burning, typing out the foundation of my revenge. Not emotional, not impulsive, surgical. Because if they thought I was trash, then I would become the fire that reduced everything they built to ashes. The day came when I stepped back into their world, not as their daughter, not as their victim, but as the shadow they never saw growing. I hadn't spoken to them in months, but they found me. My mother's voice came through the phone one morning, fake sweetness dripping through the receiver. "We're hosting a dinner, family only. Don't embarrass us by saying no." I almost laughed. After leaving me to die in a hospital bed, now they wanted me at their table. I said yes, because it was exactly what I needed. I walked into that house with my scarred lungs, my secondhand dress, and a calm smile. My sister twirled in her new outfit, bragging about a vacation to Europe. My father boomed about his business sense, waving a glass of whiskey like a king. My mother smirked at me as if daring me to break down. But I didn't break. I watched, I listened, and I waited. Because I had already moved ahead of them in ways they couldn't imagine. I had quietly reported their misuse of my medical fund to the insurance board. I had tipped off the contractor they cheated, giving him proof of their fraud. I had spoken to neighbors who were all too happy to share stories of how my parents stole money, bullied tenants, and funneled everything into my sister's life. Their little empire wasn't built on pride. It was built on theft, and I had stacked the evidence high enough to bury them. That dinner was their last supper without knowing it. The following week, investigators knocked on their door. My father tried to bluff, my mother tried to play innocent, but the walls closed in fast. Accounts were frozen. Properties flagged. Contractors demanded payment. The whispers around town turned into shouts. The proud family image they had paraded for years cracked like glass. My sister stormed to my apartment days later, mascara running down her face. "You ruined everything! Do you know what people are saying about us?" I stood in the doorway, calm. "They're saying the truth. You just don't like how it sounds." She lunged at me, calling me every name she could spit out, but she wasn't the one who mattered. The real confrontation came later. My parents showed up at my job. Yes, my job. The same office they once mocked me for working at. They came in furious, their faces red, their pride shattered. My father slammed his hand on the counter. "You think you're clever? You think you can humiliate us?" I stood, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I never had before. "No, you humiliated yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see it." He called me trash again. My mother sneered, "We should have left you in that hospital. Worthless." But this time their words didn't sting, because the office wasn't empty. My coworkers stood behind me, watching. People who knew me, people who respected me. Their voices carried, and my parents' cruelty wasn't hidden anymore. For once, it wasn't me gasping for air while they laughed. It was them choking on silence, realizing nobody was on their side. The final blow came when the insurance board sent them an official letter, fraud charges pending. Their home, the very place they used to lock me out, was seized to pay restitution. My sister's vacations ended. My father's business reputation was ashes. My mother's smirk vanished. And me? I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to hit them. I didn't need to bow them to their knees. I just watched as the people who tried to kill me with laughter, neglect, and cruelty were stripped of everything they worshipped. Status, money, image. Trash, they called me. But in the end, it was them standing in the street with nothing but garbage bags of their own clothes, while I stood tall, breathing steady, scars in my lungs, but fire in my chest. That was the real revenge. Not loud, not poetic, but absolute. Because I didn't just survive them, I ended them. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.